Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome for joining the RCEP implications to Hong Kong and the region webinar. This is co-organized by Hong Kong Coalition and the 6 major trade associations and China Daily. So this is RCEP implications to Hong Kong and the region webinar. You are all aware that Hong Kong is now being affected by the 5th wave of COVID-19, and we're not able to organize offline seminar. But for Hong Kong business sector and the SMEs in particular, how can they enjoy broader economic and trade opportunities? Hong Kong Coalition is of the view that RCEP is a good topic. Today, we are very honored to have from the Hong Kong SARG, Mr. Brian Low, Director General of Trade and Industry, to give us and deliver an opening remark. And today there are also 4 very important speakers. So they are Dr. Patrick Lau, Deputy Executive Director of Hong Kong Trade Development Council. He is still in Malaysia now. He can talk about the 10 ASEAN countries. We also have in Beijing Dr. Wong Hui Yao, founder and president of Center for China and Globalization. He will speak in Mandarin. And then we have the 3rd speaker, Dr. Hai Bin Ju, Chief China Economist and Head of Greater China Economic Research of JP Morgan. And our final speaker, our last speaker, is Professor Hei Wai Tang, Professor of Economics of the Hong Kong Institute of Economics and Business Strategy. So may I now invite all our speakers to show their face, and then we can take an online picture together. Let's give everybody a smile. Thank you. I would first like to invite Mr. Brian Low, Director General of Trade and Industry. He has already videotaped a speech for around 10 minutes. Mr. Low, please. Mr. Kennedy Wong, guest speakers, ladies and gentlemen online, today I'm honored to take part in this RCEP implications to Hong Kong and the region webinar organized by Hong Kong Coalition. I'm going to talk about the implications and help of RCEP to Hong Kong. Hong Kong is an external-oriented economy. Free trade and multilateral cooperation is important to Hong Kong. Under the 14th Five-Year Plan, Hong Kong continues to start collaboration with our country as well as different countries. So we are capitalizing on the unique characteristics of one country, two systems, and we want to enhance the free trade network and develop multilateral collaboration. In this way, Hong Kong's status as a trade center is enhanced, and this can also boost recovery after COVID-19. In order to help Hong Kong businesses to avoid uncertainties in the economy and trade, we have been promoting closer economic and trade relations. With 13 economies, we have signed already 8 free trade agreements. So they include 20 economies. For FTA, where Hong Kong goods, services, and investment can enjoy more favorable conditions to enter overseas market. There's also legal protection and stability. So Hong Kong businesses can diversify their markets, and they can take part in greater global economic integration. For RCEP, starting 12th February last year, in all ASEAN members and Hong Kong, it takes full effect. ASEAN is an important trading partner for Hong Kong. For trade of goods, starting 1997, RCEP was the 5th trading partner of Hong Kong, and in 2007, it became the 3rd, and starting 2021, they became the 2nd largest trading partner. And ASEAN is also the 4th largest service trade partner of Hong Kong. So now RCEP has become the 5th largest economy, only following the US, China, Japan, and Germany. So in terms of demand for services and goods, it is rising in RCEP. As a result, RCEP is now a very important market for investment and trade for Hong Kong. The chief executive said in her policy address that this government wants to enhance trading and investment relationship with RCEP, with ASEAN. So the signing of RCEP is a very important strategic goal, and on this basis, SARG is actively striving to join RCEP as soon as possible. This is also the topic and theme for today. RCEP is signed by China, ASEAN, Australia, Japan, Korea, and New Zealand on 15th of November 2020, and starting this year, it took effect in most countries. 18 months thereafter, then according to the RCEP Association, it is available for other countries and other trading nations to join. RCEP is the largest free trade agreement, accounting for 30% of global trade and 28% of total trading value. It covers population of 2 billion. So it's rapid growth, or actually the ratifying countries of RCEP are important milestones. So with RCEP, there can be better regional collaboration and economic integration, and there will be big driving force for recovery after COVID-19. Hong Kong has been adhering to free trade policy, and we are having a rule-based trading arrangement. We are doing a lot to enhance regional cooperation. We have closer cooperation relationship with RCEP countries. Together with 15 RCEP countries, we had 962 billion worth of trade with the RCEP countries, 70% of Hong Kong's total. In terms of service trade, in 2019, total trade value amounted to 130 billion USD, 60% of the total of Hong Kong. If you look at 13 countries like China, ASEAN countries, Australia, and New Zealand, FTA has been signed with them. Starting 2018, the SARG, through different channels and on different occasions, including bilateral meetings, economic and trade conferences, and regional conferences, we stated that we would like to join RCEP as soon as possible. As Director General of Trade and Industry, I had met with general consulars of different countries and strive for their support. Most RCEP members expressed their welcome. And after commencement of RCEP, they said that Hong Kong can join. So last year in September, the head of ASEAN expressed that he welcomes Hong Kong's joining RCEP because Hong Kong has the favorable conditions to bring about benefits to the overall RCEP. On the 21st of January, the Secretary for Commerce had already sent a letter to the Secretary General of ASEAN to formally apply to join RCEP. And on the 31st of January, the head of ASEAN already said that they had already relayed our application to RCEP for consideration. We will keep in close contact with RCEP members, and we would like to strive for the earliest joining of Hong Kong. RCEP is a modern, comprehensive, and win-win free trade agreement. By joining RCEP, the trading and investment and economic links between Hong Kong and the other countries can be enhanced. Besides, we can integrate further into the overall industrial chain. And we can also benefit from a number of measures, including reduction of tariff, market access, elimination of trade barriers, and simplification of customs arrangement, so that trading costs can be lowered, and then there will be new opportunities for Hong Kong businesses. Specifically, by joining RCEP, the following advantages can be expected. First, the FTA network can be expanded to cover Japan and Korea as well. In 2021, Korea and Japan were the 5th and the 6th largest trading partner of goods for Hong Kong, accounting for 8% of the total, 10.1 billion USD in total. Hong Kong SARG recently is promoting reindustrialization in order to enhance our competitiveness. By joining RCEP, our manufacturing sector, especially the high-end manufacturing sector, can enjoy reduction in tariff, and at the same time, in terms of country of origin rules, the requirements can be simplified. And then in the production process, the enterprises can flexibly use any materials or components manufactured by RCEP countries in the production process. In this way, we are able to conduct manufacturing and processing in a more competitive way. The third advantage is that RCEP, to many very competitive services, including financial services, professional services, supply chain management services, broader market room with legal protection can be provided. Besides, there are other benefits as well. As the sixth largest good trading entity, Hong Kong's participation can enhance RCEP status so that RCEP can enhance its leading role as the biggest free trade network. Besides, Hong Kong is the main source of investment in Asia Pacific, and RCEP is a major destination of investment. In 2020, more than 50% of our outbound investment. Recently, politics are very tense, and there is COVID-19 as well. SARG has been working hard to ride out the challenges in the external environment. So with the development of dual circulation and the support of the 14th Five-Year Plan, Hong Kong as a facilitator of international circulation will play a better role under one country, two systems. We will enhance our economic and trade links with other neighbors so as to expand our economic and trade network. And then Hong Kong and other trading partners and economies can enjoy win-win and broader development opportunities. I would like to invite all online and offline leaders and government officials, when you talk to trading partners and government officials, please promote Hong Kong, and let's work together for Hong Kong to join RCEP as soon as possible. Finally, I would like to thank Hong Kong Coalition for organizing this webinar, and I wish this webinar all success, all the best, good health. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Brian Low. Mr. Low pointed out that in the past, in terms of trading of goods and also trading of services, Hong Kong has done a lot to promote. And in the past few decades, we need to thank the Hong Kong Trade Development Council. Hong Kong TDC has 50-odd offices in the world, including those in mainland China. Within TDC, those responsible for these 50 offices and responsible for innovation, service trade promotion, the responsibilities rest with our next speaker, Dr. Patrick Lau. Patrick, you are now in Malaysia. So thank you very much. I hope that you can share with us in greater detail. Thank you. Thank you, Kennedy. And thank you, Hong Kong Coalition, for the invitation. Hong Kong TDC is very honored to have this opportunity to explore more about RCEP, which is a very important topic. Today, I have prepared some PowerPoint slides, so let me go through them with you. Next slide, please. First of all, if you don't know Hong Kong TDC, we are a statutory organization in Hong Kong. We have been established for 56 years. We're set up in 1960. And actually, we want to develop Hong Kong trade, and we were established for Hong Kong businesses. So our services are made available to Hong Kong businesses. Through this webinar, I would like to talk more about our support services for Hong Kong businesses so that they know. Just now, Kennedy said that we have 50 offices in the world. So these offices help Hong Kong businesses to develop new markets because we send out our TDC representatives to those offices so that they can help Hong Kong businesses develop local markets. Next slide. I would like to talk about how Hong Kong TDC views RCEP. So we see RCEP as a good opportunity. It is good news. Under the pandemic, Hong Kong businesses need good news. And we can see how Hong Kong businesses can seize the good news. So I'm going to share with you some concrete cases on how Hong Kong businesses use our service and how some of them have already developed RCEP markets. I will also talk about activities and events of TDC this year. You can feel free to join. Next slide. So the theme for today, RCEP. The full name is Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. We are very excited because it is of the largest scale in terms of, or as a free trade agreement. It covers 30% of global population. At the same time, it covers around 1/3 of global GDP. So you can see that it is of a large scale. Among member nations in 2019, there are 15 member nations under RCEP, and among them, the total trading value amounted to $2.3 trillion USD. So it is really huge. Many people have heard of RCEP. So trading among member nations will be enhanced, tariffs will be abolished, and trading barriers will also be eliminated. The way how we see it is that it can integrate and unify regional economies, and it plays an enhancing role. So this is one way how RCEP can help the business sector a lot. Next slide. So here I would like to emphasize the second point. This is very important. For RCEP, in terms of the service industry, member nations have to be open so that other member nations can provide services there. And it should be a policy that facilitates foreign investment. So for Hong Kong businesses, we may have products that we would like to export to new markets. At the same time, we also have professional services, logistic services, creative services in Hong Kong. So the service sector can make use of RCEP to expand the market in the 15 member nations. If you look at the statistics, just now Brian also mentioned that the trading volume between Hong Kong and RCEP members is already huge, 700 billion USD, or 73% of the total of Hong Kong. So in other words, many Hong Kong businesses traditionally worked with the American and the European markets. However, this is changing gradually. So in Asia, trade with the Asian nations is also very important. I would like to make one point. In Hong Kong, many businesses trade mainly in the form of re-exports. So in other words, in terms of buying and selling, I think Hong Kong businesses connect the buyer and the sellers, and the goods don't need to go through Hong Kong. The goods don't need to be imported to Hong Kong to be resold. Actually, there can be offshore trading. So actually, this is the biggest part in Hong Kong trade, and that is re-exports, offshore trading. So for trade among RCEP member nations, I think we play a very important facilitating role, because regarding Hong Kong businesses, very often among RCEP member nations, they are still not familiar with one another. They may need a middle partner, an intermediary, to facilitate their trade. So this is also one strength of Hong Kong. So please note that the RCEP market will be very important, especially for Hong Kong businesses working on offshore trading. It is going to be a very big market and highlight. Next slide, please. Just now, the Director General already said that among the 15 member nations, Hong Kong has already got free trade agreements with 13 of them. So the only exceptions are Japan and Korea. So within the region, Hong Kong is already trading with many countries. As the Director General said, if Hong Kong joins RCEP, then I think the regional developments can further be enhanced. Today, if Hong Kong businesses join this webinar, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that regarding the RCEP market, it will not be inferior to the American and European markets. For mainland China, the Chinese consumption market is already the second largest consumption market in the world. And if you look at ASEAN, the 10 ASEAN countries, the younger generation and the middle class are getting bigger, and this is big purchasing power. So if consumers want to buy very good quality Hong Kong products, then RCEP market is definitely a big market that should not be neglected. And if we consider the past generations of the Hong Kong businesses, they might have focused on the European and American markets. Now they should take a look at the RCEP market, which may be a big growth engine for their businesses. So this is a special appeal that I would like to make to Hong Kong businesses. In terms of trade, of course, we have to pay attention to the RCEP market. Next slide, please. Here, you can see the other parts which I just mentioned. In Hong Kong, we also export our services. We offer many professional services by our lawyers, accountants, architects. We also offer logistic services, creative services, and so on, technology services. So for these service sectors, they can also offer to RCEP countries. The pandemic affected Southeast Asian countries a lot. Many Southeast Asian countries before the pandemic developed well. They received a lot of investments from investors. They were given much attention by investors, so the investments boosted the infrastructural development. Under the pandemic, this was seriously affected. So here is now another big business opportunity. Some projects in, for example, the Southeast Asian countries and other RCEP nations. Well, you can see one example here on this slide. I think it is once in a lifetime opportunity. For instance, the relocation of the capital of Indonesia. Indonesia is the fourth largest country in the world, and they are going to relocate their capital to another place. They're going to create a new city and make it their capital. So they will build subway lines, airports, terminal facilities, roads, five-star hotels, and many other civic facilities, for example, stadiums, sports grounds, and so on. So this is a brand new project, which is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. In 2019, Hong Kong TDC led a delegation to Indonesia. And in 2020, before the pandemic, originally, we had already made plans to bring many Hong Kong companies there. However, because of the pandemic, because of the travel restrictions, so far, we still were not able to really make the trip. But then the relationship has started already, and we are working with more and more Hong Kong businesses. They also see that the relocation of Indonesian capital is going to be a huge opportunity. The Indonesia market is already big enough, and this is a project approved by the Indonesian president personally, and the name of the capital has been confirmed, Yusutara, and this is a confirmed project already. Of course, because of the pandemic, there is slight delay, and we hope that Hong Kong businesses can take part in different areas so that they can make use of their expertise to contribute to the building of the new Indonesian capital. In other Southeast Asian countries, there are also big projects. For example, in Thailand, there's the Eastern Economic Corridor project. It is going to be a huge industrial park. And there will be participation from all fronts. For example, there can be participation in terms of investment, logistics, traffic facilities, and so on. So if Hong Kong businesses can take part, if you can offer the needed services, then you can go through Hong Kong TDC. We can approach these projects in Southeast Asia together. So for this kind of project, there is an important source of investment, and that is the mainland enterprises. Because mainland enterprises want to go abroad, they have the aspiration of internationalization. And Hong Kong businesses can help mainland businesses in this way. On one hand, we can serve as their advisors. For example, our lawyers and so on. At the same time, we can facilitate deals. We can help mainland investors to identify projects in Southeast Asia, and then Hong Kong businesses can take part in the process. So there can be a tripartite collaboration to work on investment projects. For example, the relocation of capital project, where there are many sub-projects under it. So if Hong Kong businesses are interested, please feel free to contact Hong Kong TDC. And there are many projects underway which we can share with you. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see another very big business opportunity. It is an important one, a highlighted one under the 14th Five-Year Plan, and it is sustainable development. We believe that RCEP, the 15 RCEP member nations, will become the biggest destination of investment in relation to renewable energy because here there are a lot of sustainable development needs within this region in the 15 member nations. So as I said just now, Hong Kong can offer related service and expertise to help facilitate even more renewable energy, sustainable development projects in the region. Of course, these will include mainland China, 10 ASEAN countries. In terms of energy upgrade, and in the region, there are a lot of clean energy resources, for example, hydro power, solar energy, and so on. There is big funding need for these projects, so I believe these will happen in this area. So I hope Hong Kong businesses can pay more attention to this area. Next slide, please. So concerning the positioning of Hong Kong, first of all, we would like to facilitate trade among RCEP nations because all along, Hong Kong businesses have been working on offshore trading. We facilitate buying and selling between the two sides. So we should pay more attention to the RCEP market. We don't need to import the goods to Hong Kong for sale. We can actually facilitate the connection. So this is a big opportunity for us. Second, we can facilitate investment projects. For example, there may be mainland capital from mainland investors, and they would like to invest into international projects. So just now I have already shown you the bright prospects under RCEP, and there can be many very good projects available for mainland enterprises to invest, and Hong Kong can serve as a third party to promote investment. After the integration and unification of market under RCEP, well, now they do have a common rules of origin concept. In the past, Hong Kong businesses might be producing some goods in mainland China. Now they can consider the whole RCEP market as a manufacturing base, because after unification and integration, it will be more convenient for Hong Kong businesses to enhance their production lines. Later on, I can share with you a case which has already succeeded. So a Hong Kong business has identified the opportunity. So later on, I will share with you about that case. So just now, I hope I have convinced you to pay attention to RCEP. You may ask, for Hong Kong businesses, especially SMEs, what should be the next step? Is this too huge, too big for SMEs? Is this only for the big enterprises? So Hong Kong TDC will help SMEs to explore opportunities in RCEP, especially in ASEAN. So we have a special program known as T-Box. Here, you can see that for T-Box, the full name is Transformation Sandbox. If you look at the concept of this sandbox, well, originally your business may already be very successful. It was passed down from your father or your grandfather. And orders keep on coming in from the American and European markets. However, you can still come up with some transformation plans to try them out in other places. And you can test them and try them out in T-Box. So you don't need to change your existing business because it's already very successful. But you can consider some new markets in our T-Box. If you succeed, then of course that would be great. You can integrate that with your existing business. But if it fails, it doesn't affect your original existing successful business. It won't affect your American and European orders. So this is the concept of T-Box. Anyway, for T-Box, every year you can try to think of ways to enhance your enterprise. You can always think of transformation goals. So it's like New Year resolution. CNY and the Lantern Festival have just passed. So in the year of the tiger, perhaps we want to pay more attention to the manpower market, then you can join the T-Box program. There are 4 areas: brand upgrading, e-commerce. Many Hong Kong companies may be only involved in physical trading for the time being, while RCEP emphasizes a lot e-commerce, because I think you all can see the development of digital business in China and in Southeast Asia. The digital economic development is also fast, especially in the young generation. The young generation is very used to shopping online using their mobile phones. So e-commerce is also one possible direction and path of transformation. There can be enhancement of the production line and development of new markets as well. So no matter what goals Hong Kong businesses have, as long as they are about transformation, and if you don't know what services we can provide, then please join our T-Box. Hong Kong TDC colleagues can work with you to achieve your transformation goals. The duration is 3 to 6 months. We need to have a fixed duration. It is a free of charge service for all Hong Kong businesses. So you can make use of services of our T-Box to achieve your goals. Any other examples? Well, let me share with you on the next slide. For this slide, well, you can see that this is a very interesting case. This is a rather recent case about Chatbox. So, well, the company knows that the Indonesian market is very huge. So this is a startup in Hong Kong. It is a small enterprise. It is known as PopSend Robotics. And it has joined our T-Box. They would like to develop new markets. So they make these very interesting talk bowl, teaching people to speak in different languages. Now, under the pandemic, children stay at home. You may be able to teach your children, but if there is a robot that can teach children to speak and new vocabulary, new languages, then, well, the PopSend Robotics is doing that. They know that the Indonesian market is huge, and we are talking about a population of 270 million, and there are many young people as well. Most of their population are young people. So the PopSend Robotics company would like to penetrate that market, and by means of our T-Box and our services, well, we connected them to the Indonesian representatives, and here you can see a representative from Hong Kong to Indonesia. He is very familiar with operations in Indonesia, and when you want to enter a new market, you will need advice. Besides, we can refer you to some chambers of commerce, so you can enjoy some networking to start your business. Besides, we also have a series of programs including seminars, small group services. And in Indonesia, we are able to group together a small number of Hong Kong businesses, and then we can take them to the Indonesian consulate. We can refer them to the general consular and strive for his support, so that the Hong Kong businesses can more actively develop and pursue their business locally. This is very useful, especially under the pandemic. After the referral events, bringing the Hong Kong businesses to the general consulars of Indonesia, well, the feedback is very positive because regarding visa arrangements and processing about human resources, Hong Kong businesses have got contacts in the consulate general, and then they are able to get assistance. In some cases, they need to open accounts, but then because of the pandemic, they can't fly to Indonesia. And so the general consulate can arrange all documents to be processed in Hong Kong and then sent to Indonesia. So many T-Box services would like to help Hong Kong businesses to accomplish their transformation goals. Next example. This is an example about optimization of production line. So they have joined T-Box. So here you can see this company, Cam Yuen. Cam Yuen manufactures metal components for watches and other metal equipment. And they have selected Thailand to expand their production lines. Originally, they manufactured in Dongguan. However, because of the China-US trade conflict and tariffs, they need a backup. So they have chosen another market in Southeast Asia. This makes sense. With RCEP, it makes even more sense. As I said just now, there are now new measures and common rules of origin. As long as you can complete your production within RCEP member nations, then it will be treated in the same way, so there won't be differentiation. In this way, RCEP trade can be enhanced and production can also be optimized. Cam Yuen has moved part of its production line to Thailand via T-Box because they are not familiar with Thailand, and it's a new market, a new environment for them. So we introduced them to our Hong Kong TDC representative in Thailand, and advice was given to them. We referred them to the Thai Chamber of Commerce. Cam Yuen is a very proactive and enthusiastic company. Another company is Syntec. They have chosen Vietnam as a production base to manufacture sensors. So they have been engaged in this business for a long time. They have chosen Vietnam to expand their production line via T-Box. And they successfully established their presence in Vietnam. Next slide. All right, this is the last case I would like to share with you. Some Hong Kong companies may be of the view that Korea and Japan are already very mature markets, so there won't be any more business opportunity. It would be too late to develop those markets. In fact, it is not really the case. So here, if you look at the left picture, this is a company designing parts and components of clocks and watches, Botax. Botax would like to develop the Japanese market, and they would like to be connected with Japanese design. We're talking about high-end consumer goods, so they think that Japan is useful to them. In Japan, we have office, so through T-Box, we're able to make contacts with our Japanese representative, and we can help the Hong Kong company to develop and promote their products in the Japanese market. And then there's another example, Galleon International, the picture on the right. They want to identify new products in Japan and bring them back to Hong Kong. This is their goal of transformation, and they have joined T-Box and got our assistance. Next slide, please. Today, I would like to make use of very concrete examples to tell you why Hong Kong TDC is very much interested in RCEP, because we think that the business opportunities are huge and Hong Kong companies should not miss this very golden opportunity and this rapidly growing market. We are talking about production, service industry, consumption, and for example, watchmaking. We can facilitate local investment and we can help both parties on the two sides. Hong Kong can serve as a middleman, a bridge in the middle to facilitate trade and investment. Then in this way, I think all parties will appreciate. So that's why we think that Hong Kong companies should pay special attention to RCEP to see whether they can enjoy new business opportunities. They can explore more about the RCEP market. Let me teach you a very simple way. If you don't know much about Hong Kong TDC events and activities, well, we organize many international conferences and exhibitions. Of course, those are helpful. But then the simplest way for SMEs is to join T-Box and set your own goal. For instance, you may want to develop a certain Southeast Asian market. Then you can start. You can try whether that is workable and whether it is suitable for your business transformation. So that's all from my sharing. Once again, thank you, organizer, for giving this opportunity, for giving the Hong Kong TDC this opportunity. Of course, we are all in difficult times now. We hope that RCEP and other new markets can represent good news to you and good options for you to consider. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hong Kong TDC and Dr. Patrick Lau. Patrick, you are now in Malaysia. When you come back, I'm sure you will have deeper understanding of the ASEAN market. After the pandemic, we hope that more Hong Kong businesses, SMEs, can join you and visit different Hong Kong TDC offices in different parts of the world. Sure. Thank you, Patrick. I will introduce the next speaker in Mandarin. Our next speaker is Dr. Wang Huiyao. He is the founder and president of Center for China and Globalization. So, in Hong Kong and Guangzhou, Nansha, he is my colleague in the Hong Kong, Guangdong, Macau Cooperation Organization. He is a very experienced economist. At the same time, he also works in the State Council. Right now, Dr. Wang is in Beijing. I believe that he will explore this topic from a macro point of view. He will talk about his insights about RCEP and future developments. Over to you, please, Dr. Wang. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy Wong, for moderating this webinar. You have done a good job. I have listened to the previous speakers, and I think their sharing is very timely. So today, I would like to talk about how Hong Kong can capitalize on the opportunities under RCEP to achieve better development. We know that last year, or at the end of November in the year before last year, after it was signed, it took effect on the 1st of January this year. So it is about the developments in Asia, including China. There are altogether 15 countries under RCEP, and it is a very important milestone in Asia's development, also to Hong Kong. So I think the Asian century is coming. In 1820, almost 200 years ago, Asia had 2/3 of global population and more than half of global income. And later on, because of the deterioration in the Qing dynasty, well, there was much impact caused. And then in the 60s, in the 20th century, well, Asia has become the poorest continent in the world. But after that, we have seen rapid development. If you look at growth in per capita GDP in Asia, it is rising, and its share of global economy is also getting bigger. Right now, contribution of Asia to global economy exceeded 60%, and China's share exceeded 30%. According to McKinsey's estimate, in 2040, Asia will contribute to more than half of global GDP. And this may happen even earlier. Our consumption will become even bigger. Why is Asia so important? Well, in the past 1 year or so, we organized 20 global dialogues with first-class strategists, scholars in Europe and the US. And together with a very renowned professor in Singapore, we had a number of conversations. So I'm talking about Professor Ma Kai-shaw. So here you can see a book being published, The Asian 21st Century. So for this book, it states that Asia is going to be an important promoter and facilitator of unified development of the world. So the strong lead of the Western countries may come to an end in the 21st century. Since 1840, Asia had been lagging behind, and very soon we're going to see the return of Asia. And then there's also the peaceful rise of China. And there's going to be a new development trend globally. So RCEP is being backed by trade and economic development. It is going to see even bigger development. So we have organized a number of events. And here you can see a launch of the new book by Professor Kishore Mahbubani. And then we have dialogue with also Kent Corder and also Carrie Brown from London Imperial College. So we have had very deep conversation. We talked about the 21st century. So in only 4 days, the number of downloads already exceeded 200,000. And right now, more than 1 million. So this book is really very popular, well received. So it is actually related to the start of RCEP and also the accelerated integration in Asia. I think this book is worth reading. So Professor in the book made 4 points. Of course, in history, the emergence, the rise of the West had changed the world and to a large extent reshaped Asia. And then when Asia rises in power, the Western countries refuse to accept this reality. And then, however, the rise of China and Asia cannot be stopped. And right now, if you look at RCEP and also other potential integration of economy and currency integration, digital economy integration, RCEP, CPTPP may achieve a big push. So in China, ASEAN, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, we promote economic integration. CPTPP and deeper and so on. And here you can see this U.S. professor, Professor Kent Corder. In our conversation, he said that infrastructure is the best developed in China. And the rail line between China and Laos had been commissioned, and there is also the Maritime Silk Road. All these developments are going to boost mutual access. RCEP developments can be expedited as a result. I think the previous speakers have made good points. RCEP can expedite regional economic integration and the rise of Asia. So actually, between China, Japan, and Korea, to a certain extent, the free trade agreement has been accomplished through RCEP. And then for Hong Kong and 13 RCEP member nations, there are already free trade areas or free trade agreements. We hope that Hong Kong can emerge as a connecting center for RCEP. So that would be big impact on trade and investment. Trade rules and trade barriers will be greatly eliminated. And then regional trade is going to be more convenient. Flow of resources, industrial chains can be reshaped. And then there would be more efficient utilization of local resources or regional resources for ASEAN countries and so on. There would be a lot of benefits if SMEs can also join, so the industrial chains can be recreated or reshaped. During the pandemic, I think this is the biggest trade agreements being born. It is going to play a big role, and in the post-pandemic days, I think costs can come down. There would be clearer division of labor, businesses can recover, the market can be upgraded, and so on. So I am very confident in the post-pandemic recovery. In the 21st century, it is the Asian century. In terms of differences between the developed and the undeveloped, I think a better equilibrium can be achieved, and there will be a totally new layout as a result. RCEP can strengthen the stability in regional trade, and there will be better confidence among consumers, and there would be a big market with the biggest middle class scale. In China, for the middle class, it amounted to like 200, 300 million already, together with Singapore, Japan, Korea, and other RCEP nations. I think the middle class will even be further enlarged. So right now, we are talking about deglobalization very often. And then we want to promote globalization. We promote free trade. We are against unilateralism. So no matter whether we're talking about goods or services or investment, growth can be promoted. And then there can be industrial chain, supply chain, and blockchain, standardization of trade standards, and so on. So with all these soft powers, I think the hardware can also be enhanced. Among RCEP countries, there will be big synergy. So Asia, and also there would be further birth of other kinds of alliances and integration. If Hong Kong can seize the RCEP new opportunities, well, I personally think that there are many new opportunities arising from RCEP. Hong Kong's role can be bigger as a financial center. So Hong Kong can become a financial center for RCEP, because in Hong Kong, we already have very convenient trade and investment mechanisms and facilities, and we have Greater Bay Area at our back. So our status as a financial center can become more important. So we should actively explore more. And then there can be reorganization, restructuring of industrial chain and value chain, especially about trade of services. We can find our appropriate role. And then there will be new investments. For Hong Kong, in ASEAN markets, there are many new opportunities in investment. So I have other new ideas which are not stated in my PPT. I think Hong Kong has some unique strengths. Can we create an RCEP research center? I believe so. We can pull together our resources to build a research center. My second suggestion is, can we build an RCEP International Talent Center in Hong Kong? Hong Kong is the most welcomed, most popular place in attracting talents. We are very close to Greater Bay Area, mainland China, and we are in the center of Asia. I think it would be great to have RCEP Talent Center in Hong Kong. Third, so can Hong Kong Coalition establish an alliance, a think tank alliance, so we can put together a number of think tanks together so that we can build an alliance here. Then we can build and discuss how we can further enhance and capitalize on RCEP for bigger benefits. Just now, Mr. Kenneth Wong also said that we have got the Greater Bay Area Committee in Nanshan, so we can build an RCEP demonstration area in Hong Kong, as well as in Nansha. So that can be based in Nansha, and then with Hong Kong, there can be a new demonstration zone together. So in Hong Kong and Nansha, we can also build a talent pool so that we can attract global talents to Hong Kong and GBA. We can relax some talent admission restrictions in order to capitalize on the strengths. Hong Kong is an international financial center. All along, we are given a lot of attention. And we have free flow of talents and so on. And our international trade throughput is very big. Our ports are very busy. And we are in the central location. If you look at Australia and New Zealand and ASEAN, 10 ASEAN countries, as well as Japan, Korea, and mainland China, well, we are actually in the center among 15 RCEP countries. So we can serve as a free trade center, talents center, talents alliance, and so on. We can also organize RCEP annual conference in Hong Kong. So a lot can be done. We want to establish many pilot schemes here in Hong Kong to build a long-term RCEP development scheme. So I think this is a very good demonstration area for RCEP. We already have one country, two systems. We also play a role as a super connector. So I think the Hong Kong TDC representative has made some very good points. We enjoy a lot of unique strengths, so we can actually hold a central role in RCEP. Hong Kong is not only China's Hong Kong and GBA's Hong Kong. We are also a center point for RCEP. So I really think that it is important for Hong Kong to join RCEP. I think ASEAN has already accepted your application. This is very good. Hong Kong is going to embrace even bigger development. And then in Hong Kong, there are very high-quality professional services. We have huge network of retail, sales, manufacturing, and processing. More importantly, we are in Greater Bay Area. So all these are strengths of Hong Kong together with the strengths of the mainland China and RCEP. All these can support Hong Kong's future prosperous development. I think these are very important. So CCG is an internationally leading think tank, and we have the 64th position. We are the only Chinese think tank being recognized by the United Nations. So we welcome friends from Hong Kong, for example, Mr. Kennedy Wong and the Hong Kong Coalition to work with us. So let's promote the role of Hong Kong in RCEP. That's all from me. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Wang, for your excellent sharing. I think you really are very forward-looking. You explored all these points on a very high point. I agree to all your points made. RCEP is something new. So various sectors of Hong Kong are trying to get preliminary understanding about it. RCEP keeps on changing. So thank you very much for your commendation of Hong Kong. We will continue to work hard. Now let me invite the other two guests to speak. After that, I hope to have some interaction and exchange with all speakers. Our next speaker is Dr. Haibin Zhu. Dr. Zhu, I have known him for about 10 years already, a close friend of mine. He is now the Managing Director, Chief China Economist, and Head of Greater China Economic Research of JP Morgan. Before coming to Hong Kong, he worked in the International Clearance Bank. He has served that bank for 10 years. So if Dr. Zhu is ready, he is not online yet. Well, Dr. Wang Huiyao, are you still online? Yes. Okay. So now you are here? Yes, yes. If you are ready, then I will first invite you to speak. Just now, Dr. Wang has pointed out that Hong Kong is a financial center for RCEP. Hong Kong is in a central location, so Hong Kong can continue to serve as super connector. So now over to you, please. Thank you, Kennedy. Thank you. I'm happy to have this opportunity to join this sharing. The previous two speakers have made some very good points. I have learned a lot. I want to focus on two areas today. RCEP and its impact on regional economy. My second point is the relationship between RCEP, mainland China, and Hong Kong. Just now, Dr. Wang did some good sharing concerning the rise of Asia and further economic integration in Asia. RCEP is very important. I think for the Asian integration, it is going to be gradual. It is not something arising only on 1st January this year. In fact, Asian integration has been continuing. It is a gradual development. If you look at other existing agreements, for example, CPTPP, and also ASEAN Plus 3, ASEAN together with China, Japan, and Korea. It is also a free trade zone. And then we also had the Greater Mekong sub-region, which is led by China. There is also another monetary arrangement. So RCEP took effect from this year onwards. It is a very concrete step, but RCEP is not the final destination. Of course, there are a lot of improvements in terms of RCEP comparing with past agreements. However, there is still a lot of room for improvement. So just now, Dr. Wang talked about other possible future alliances and integration in Asia. Now, let me give a brief introduction. I guess you are familiar. Comparing the 15 RCEP countries, well, 7 countries belong to both CPTPP and RCEP. So there is some overlapping between the two. And if you compare different free trade areas, RCEP is the largest trade agreement by economic size. As of 2020, if you look at this chart, within the region, we are talking about 26 trillion USD as economic size. It exceeds USMCA and also Euro area, CPTPP, and so on. If you look at 2021, I think this number would be an increase. In 2020, GDP of China was less than 15 trillion USD, but then in 2021, 17 trillion already. So I'm sure RCEP continues to be #1 in the world as a free trade arrangement. In the past 20 years, when you look at RCEP countries, well, they are the fastest growing countries. In 2000, the scale of RCEP lagged behind Euro area and also the USMCA. But after 20 years of development in East Asia, especially with the rise of China, we can see that the scale of RCEP accounts for a big share globally. And then the population in the region amounted to around 20 trillion. So no matter whether you look at population or economic scale, RCEP is the largest. If you look at progress made by RCEP, I think the 2 previous speakers made a lot of concrete points with examples. Okay, first of all, if you look at RCEP itself, if you concentrate on trade, the free trade area is further strengthened. But then progress will be limited because at the beginning, ASEAN +3, and then in the region, well, for example, between China and Korea, there was originally a free trade agreement. So on this point, the major breakthrough is that China, Japan, and Korea are the main basis for RCEP. So that is one progress of RCEP. But then for the 15 RCEP countries, originally there were free trade agreements among some of them. So the promotion of trade may not be that apparent. Now tariffs will come down further. So 92% of tariffs will be eliminated. And for agricultural products and other products in the future, there will be further arrangement. And then for country of origin rules, in the past, there was single country of origin, and later there would be made in RCEP origin certificate. So this is a change. Of course, for regional collaboration and industrial chain integration, a big push will result. And then in terms of customs, clearance, procedures and paperwork and so on, a lot of barriers will be eliminated, so big convenience can be achieved. And then in terms of investment, members agreed to liberalize investment on a negative list basis. So investments will be more convenient. And then for the service sector, comparing with the past, there is some improvement, but this is also a big limitation under the current RCEP. So overall speaking, if you talk about impacts on regional trade of RCEP, there are a few advantages. For inter-regional trade, there will be some benefits. It is not only short-term. For inter-regional trade, there will be faster growth. And then with other regions, in the short run, there would be, it is a negative news, but then, well, there would be developments will be dynamic. There will be benefits for member states, but then in the medium to long term, within Asia Pacific in the past 20 years, economic growth was the fastest in the world. And in the future, definitely the middle class will expand. In China, instead of export-driven, in the future, the Chinese market will be consumption-led. So if you look at consumption upgrading, the demand for trade will change from export-led to export, import, and consumption-driven. RCEP will deliver more convenience and eliminate trade barriers, and the benefits in the long run will be more apparent. In terms of investment, there would be less barriers in investment within the region. So there will be reorganization of supply chain within the region. Another important point is actually 2 points. 2 more points are very important to RCEP. As such as now, we are seeing deglobalization right now. RCEP is a region with the biggest economic vitality, and it is doing a big push to globalization. I think this is really encouraging. In terms of integration within the region, in the future, among member nations, there will be more trust. There will be further integration in Asia Pacific. I think RCEP will lay a good foundation for that. In Asia, because of different historical reasons, there used to be lack of trust among different countries. So one important impact is to enhance mutual trust among economies in the region, so that in the future there can be, for example, Asia Alliance and further integration mechanism in Asia. In terms of impacts on different countries, well, I have done some information search. Now let me summarize my findings. So this table is based on information from Peterson Institute and is research done in 2020. Basically, it talks about economic impacts brought by 3 agreements: CPTPP, RCEP, the current RCEP with 15 member nations and RCEP with 16 member nations. That is the existing 15 members and also India, plus India. So under all these different arrangements from 2020 to 2030, what will be the impact on each country's GDP? So let's focus on the 15 nations under RCEP first. Japan and Korea are the biggest beneficiaries. I think this logic is quite clear. Comparing with the past, in Japan and Korea in the past, there was no free trade area arrangement. The biggest push of RCEP is between China, Japan, and Korea. There is a multilateral free trade area. Korea can benefit the most. So here you can see up 1%. Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, 0.5%. China, also positive impact. But overall speaking, if you look at RCEP 15 compared with CPTPP, if you take a look at countries stated in red, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Australia, and New Zealand, comparing CPTPP and RCEP 15, based on Peterson's research, we can see that CPTPP member countries enjoy more or better economic plus. That's because there are still caveats in RCEP. Overall speaking, RCEP is a furtherance of free trade arrangement. However, in terms of the degree of openness, it is no match with CPTPP. It is not as deep as CPTPP. First, in terms of the scope of RCEP, in some areas, there is still some compromise. Among member countries of RCEP, well, there are quite many member countries, and if you look at the degree of development and the aspiration for trade rules, well, there are a lot of variances. In RCEP, there are developed countries like Japan, Australia, Korea, and Singapore. Their per capita GDP is very high. There are also some backward countries like Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. So if you look at Chapter 20 of RCEP, if you refer to the specific rules for Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, there are some specific clauses. And under RCEP, all member countries need to approve rules together. There must be unanimous approval. So it is very difficult to reach agreement. Now, India eventually had decided not to join because the thresholds, the rules are too high. So for the time being, India has not joined. If you look at some specific areas, for example, agriculture, RCEP still maintains some protection for agriculture. For instance, tariff protection from Japan during an interim period. And then comparing with CPTPP, in terms of trade and investment, RCEP is rather open, is more open. But then for the service sector, especially when it comes to overseas investment in services, in 50 subsectors, RCEP is more relaxed than the past. But if you look at overall openness of the service sector, it is no match of CPTPP. And then if you talk about intellectual property protection, environmental protection, labor, cross-border data, and so on, and related rules, there is still much limitation under RCEP. So let's look back to this chart. I am most surprised when I look at this finding about Singapore. So here, under RCEP 15, the net impact is 0. In other words, Singapore has not benefited much. My personal view is that the net impact may be underestimated. Besides, RCEP has to do more with trade and investment opening. And the opening up of the service sector is relatively less. Singapore is more like Hong Kong. It is a regional service center. It is a leading economy focusing much on services. So Singapore can only benefit in a limited way from RCEP. Later on, we will talk about what Hong Kong can do, but this point has to be taken into consideration. Why is it that the opening up of the service sector is limited? This is not surprising. If you look at the OECD Service Trade Restrictiveness Index, of course here Hong Kong, Singapore are not included, but we can look at the included economies. For example, we can compare them with the US and India. So if you look at service trade restrictiveness, there is big variance within the region. Australia, New Zealand are more leading. So you can see accounting, insurance, banking, telecom, legal indices. So the index will be from 0 to 1. The closer it is to 0, the more open it is, the less restriction. But if it is close to 1, if it is at 1, then that means there is full restriction. Australia and New Zealand are the most open in terms of service trade, and they are also members of CPTPC. And in legal and air transport of Japan and Korea, they still lag behind other advanced countries. And then if you look at Korea with quite high per capita GDP, its trade is rather liberal. But then in terms of the service industry, restrictiveness is quite high in some sectors. In China, Malaysia, and Thailand, India, among all the countries, is the most restrictive in service trade. So to a certain extent, you can explain why the current version of RCEP has only made little progress. And it is not doing much push in this area, because if you look at regional integration, if you look at a practical perspective, in order for RCEP to take effect, I think it cannot be a big leap forward. It cannot be a full development at one go. So RCEP is a gradual process. It is not done overnight from 0 to 1. So RCEP is a process. So on the other hand, there is a good point. In terms of degree of openness, there is limitation. Despite that, it is more realistic. So among different member countries, it is easier to expand membership. Hong Kong has already submitted application. It is being accepted. So I think after 18 months, new member countries can be admitted. I don't see much problem with Hong Kong's joining. In the future, in terms of rules, there is much room for improvement. In the future, we do hope that about services and regional investment, there can be some enhancement in terms of access. That will be more meaningful to Hong Kong. And then for China, what is the relationship between China and RCEP? I want to stress a point. RCEP is more an ASEAN initiative, not a Chinese one. So it is ASEAN-led, but China is the biggest economy in RCEP, and its influence is can't be matched by other countries. And China is promoting globalization. China has the Belt and Road, and also the AIIB, New Development Bank, and other regional arrangements. So they are complementary to RCEP. If you look at the relationship between China and ASEAN countries, RCEP can further reinforce the trade and investment relations between China and RCEP countries. It can further promote supply chain integration and industrial upgrading in China and big circulations. If you focus on the service sector, there will be a 6-year interim period, and there would be a negative list mechanism. It is in line with the reform being promoted by China. Now, I would like to talk about the relationship between China and other RCEP countries. In the past decades, here you can see the ties became closer and closer. If you look at China's impact on the world, since the entry of China into WTO, well, per capita GDP reached 12,000 USD, and it is very close to the high income country threshold set by World Bank. Since 2008, the contribution to global growth exceeded 30% every year, and it exceeded that of US. It became the largest economic growth engine. And here, EMX represents emerging Asia excluding China. Asian economies before 2008, Asia was mainly affected primarily by DM, developed markets. So the index is 0.7. But then emerging markets impact was much less. But after 2008, after global financial crisis, the two reversed position. So in 2010, China and Asian economies' correlation rose from 0.1 to 0.4, 0.5. And Asian economies and developed markets correlation came down from 0.7 to 0.2 roughly. So in other words, China has become the biggest leader in Asian economies. And if you look at ASEAN's trade data, this is the latest data for 2020. So more than 50%. For example, in the Philippines, it reached even 61%. Then from China's point of view, here you can see the dotted orange line for ASEAN. At the beginning, in 2008, 8% only ASEAN's share. Now ASEAN has become the largest trading partner, more than 14%. US, so EU number two, US the third. If we add Japan and Korea, ASEAN RCEP member countries account for 30–40% of total China trade, which is huge. So in terms of the push on trade, If you also include Hong Kong as well, I think Hong Kong plays a big role in re-export as a re-export hub, and RCEP's importance is going to go up. And then about regional supply chain integration. Of course, there are some challenges on further regional integration of the supply chain. This is not a transient phenomenon. It happened. It did not happen after 2008. Well, actually, if you look at the global share, China's share of global imports by sector, let's say footwear, high skins, and so on, before and after 2010, we saw a turning point. China's share of the global total is coming down. If you look at automobile and electronics in 2020, China's share continues to rise. In the past, China's industries were mainly labor intensive, and now we have reached a midstream that is electronic, manufacturing, automobile, and so on. This change in the supply chain, the main beneficiaries are in Southeast Asia, especially Vietnam and ASEAN countries. Vietnam is the biggest beneficiary. The main reason is a production cost comparison. In the past 10-odd years, labor costs, land costs, and all production costs increased in China. So for low-end labor-intensive manufacturing, they will definitely move to places with lower labor costs. So if you look at the overall regional supply chain reorganization, let's look at these two charts. Trade comparison between China and other Southeast Asia countries. Main goods for exports are in car components, electronic components, mechanical manufacturing, SITC 7 and 8, 9. So raw materials, commodities, or I should say agricultural products, low-end raw materials, the share is relatively low. In the future, for mid to low-end labor in China, the situation will be more like Japan and Korea in the past. So manufacturing will move further to other low labor cost countries. So for China, for commodities and imports of commodities and raw materials, the demand will be increasing. And manufacturing will be more skewed towards cheaper Southeast Asian countries. China wants to promote advanced manufacturing sector, and that would be transformation. For example, towards green sustainable development, environmental protection. So of course, there will be huge opportunity arising in the market. As Dr. Wang said, Hong Kong can also seize the opportunity in the process. In financial service area, RCEP is rather low in degree of openness. But then in the past 10 years, China's financial impact on the region is strengthening, especially about CNY, RMB. So on the right, you can see CNY and EMAX FX correlation. After 2017, you can see that RMB has become an anchor currency in the region. In the future, under the push of RCEP, concerning internationalization of RMB and monetary integration within the region, I think RCEP RCEP will play an active role. China will play an active role. Hong Kong is an international financial center and the biggest offshore market for RMB internationalization. So together with the Belt and Road and RCEP, I think Hong Kong is important to the international use of RMB. Hong Kong will see a lot of potential here. So here's my conclusion. If you look at RCEP member countries and also China, Hong Kong, I think there will be new opportunities. RCEP is a gradual exercise. It is not one-off. It is going to be a gradual evolution instead of from 0 to 1. So I also want to look at the integration of Asia as a whole and the rise of Asia. How can we make better use of this opportunity to improve development in mainland China and Hong Kong? That should be the focus. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Hai Bin-ju. You provided a lot of information, actually very rich information. And I guess online participants would need some time to digest the information. Okay, I will switch back to Cantonese. Now I would like to invite the next speaker, our last speaker for today. He is a local speaker, Professor He Wai Tang, Professor of Economics, Associate Director of Hong Kong Institute of Economics and Business Strategy. He is an expert of region economy. He graduated from MIT. After that, he worked as a professor in economics in Johns Hopkins University. So now let me invite Professor Tang to do a sharing with us, please. Thank you, Mr. Wong. Thank you, Hong Kong Coalition, for the invitation to join this webinar. And I can have a discussion with the other very important guests about RCEP. There are both pros and cons for being the last speaker. So the good point is I don't need to say too much because many points are already made by the previous 3 speakers. And the bad point is that there is not much I can say. There is only little I can supplement because the speakers had talked about the history, they shared some data and statistics, and they also analyzed some enterprises. So in the coming 15 minutes, I would like to give you a more academic, macro point of view about RCEP. And finally, I would also like to talk about my views about Hong Kong economic transformation and also researches and analysis done within the RCEP framework. What kind of opportunities can we see about Hong Kong economic transformation so that we can start anew here in Hong Kong? Can you see my full screen? Can you see full screen, please? No? How come? Let me share my screen again. Sorry. Can you see my next slide? Okay. Okay, let me expand it. Let me enlarge it. Okay. Okay, full screen. Okay. First, deglobalization. Many people said that because of the China-US trade conflict, we started to see deglobalization. And after 2020, because of COVID-19, the trade chain has broken. And so we see a downtrend in globalization. Actually, in the past decade, we saw deglobalization and slow globalization already. Let's look at the vertical axis. It is a ratio, global export over global GDP. Of course, this ratio can't reach 100% unless if our planet trades with other stars or planets. But then there is an unbalanced development. Since the 80s to 2008, global trade and global economy experienced super globalization, so from 17 to 30%. And then in 2008, there was the global financial crisis. There was downturn in global economy and global trade. Global GDP fell 2.5%. Global trade dropped 16%. So definitely, this index fell a lot. After a sharp rebound in 2010 and 2011, many people expected that this index will continue to go up together with the orange line. However, you can see this ratio pausing at 30%. It has not changed much. In 2015-16, there is slight downward movement. In the past 2 years, because of COVID-19, the situation was abnormal. In 2020, Asia exports rebounded fast because at that time, China resumed production and worked very quickly, and they controlled the pandemic within a short period of time. Many factories have resumed 100% production, but then in Europe and the US and many other developing countries, they are still under the pandemic influence. Their productivity came down a lot. In terms of purchasing power, because the central bank had conducted QE. So consumption increased in the West. Their production ability has not resumed. So there is an imbalance. In Asia, led by China, in 2021 and 2020, production rebounded very quickly, but this is because of the pandemic. Do we need to worry about deglobalization? My research points out that there are two big reasons affecting this globalization process. As a result, we saw deglobalization underway since 2010. There are some structural factors and systematic factors. Industries use many new technologies, automation, AI, Industry 4.0. These new technologies replace laborers, especially those in the developing countries. As a result, MNCs need to subcontract in order to increase their purchasing power and trade volume. Secondly, there is aging population in the world. The elderly usually spends money in the service sector, especially healthcare and elderly care. So the need for trade of goods declined. Thirdly, I don't need to say too much. Among the big nations, especially in the Western democratic world, the governments have the sentiment about deglobalization. And because of their policies in the past 3 to 4 years, there were more trade barriers, especially in the U.S. The U.S. started trade war not only against China, but also against other countries. So with these three factors, in the past 10 years, the pace of globalization has been stagnant as opposed to global GDP. At the same time, COVID-19 continued the negative trend of deglobalization. So then we have to look at which countries still embrace globalization and multilateral cooperation. Of course, given the theme today, you know the answer is the Asian countries, especially the 15 RCEP countries. And China, all along, has been embracing globalization. Especially after the 14th five-year plan, there are the dual circulation concepts. For the external circulation, China wants a more open global trade platform and more multilateralization so that there can be faster recovery after the pandemic. In the past 40 years, if I have only 10 seconds to say which country promoted globalization the most, it is very obvious. The answer is China. In the past 3 to 4 decades of globalization, China has become the center of the whole global trade system. In 2020, here is a research done by Princeton University, and China is already linked with the US on a line, by a line in terms of trade. And for North America and different Asian countries, because of China-US trade, there are also more connections and more interactions in the economy, trade, and investment. China and US are decoupling. Some people are saying that, but to me, I think this is impossible. Technically speaking, there may be some degree of decoupling, but then in terms of economy and investment, it is really unimaginable. In 2018, there was the trade war. After that, there was technology war and also unilateral sanctions imposed by the US. As a result, in some areas, the growth rate has slowed down. Before 2015, US was still the largest trading partner of China. In 2016 onwards, US was replaced by EU as the largest trading partner of China, and in recent years, the 10 ASEAN countries have become China's largest trading partner. This already happened before the signing of RCEP. So you can see here, in Asia for Asia, trade chain, it was already born in the past 2 years. In November 2020, as such as now, under COVID-19, the most encouraging thing is that 15 countries at that moment chose to go back to the path of multilateralism. So by means of economy and trade link, we hope that there would be more long-term and stable economic development, and we hope to recover from the pandemic and have trade to boost economic growth. You may say that the Asian economic circle is accounting for a bigger and bigger part of the globe. So because of economic growth, they rely on each other more and more. At the same time, RCEP has reduced trade barrier among member nations. This is a new free trade economy and a special one because the second largest and third largest economy, that is Japan and China and Japan, are in RCEP. At the same time, there are 3 types of countries. Developed countries, including Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. Middle-income countries, Thailand, Malaysia, China, and also undeveloped but rapidly developing countries like Cambodia, Myanmar, and so on. So these are 3 types of economies. They have different economic, cultural background. Still, they can sit together and say that they would like to cooperate through international trade, hoping to enjoy stable and prosperous development together. This is worth taking reference from by other countries, especially those anti-globalization countries. Do they want longer-term economic development, or do they only look at their own economic interests so that they go for deglobalization? At the end of the day, there will be further split and division in global economy. Many people know that this is the largest free trade agreement. It accounts for 1/3 of global population and 1/3 of global GDP. Population will continue to grow. GDP growth will be faster than population growth. In other words, the rapidly developing economies will be seen in this region. Different research reports said that in 10 to 12 years, 15 RCEP countries at that time will account for 1/2 of global GDP. So you can't neglect this region. Member nations will rely more and more on each other. For non-member governments, they will be more interested to work with these member countries and more economic interaction. As Mr. Zhu said, there may be other types, CPTPP, other types of trade agreements, and new economies like Hong Kong and other Asian countries that have not joined yet will be more interested to join later. So in the future, I think that this region will continue to develop. and grow. Just now, because of time constraints, our other speakers have not talked about different constituents of RCEP. Well, actually, if you compare with the WTO framework and other bilateral agreements, what are the differences and what has been the progress? There are altogether 20 chapters. In the first 8 chapters, I can say that they are trade agreements of the 20th century. There is not much new, and there is nothing exciting. If you refer to USMC and other WTO agreements, there are similar components. So, for example, elimination and reduction of trade barriers like tariffs, optimization of customs procedures so that cross-border logistics can be smoother. If you ask me about these 8 parts, these 20th century parts, what is the most important chapter? What is the longest chapter? Chapter 3. It is about rules of origin. And just now, Mr. Lau already said that the definition of rules of origin or country of origin, let's say if a product is produced in Vietnam and it is to be exported to Thailand, and they belong to a low tariff trade agreement under ASEAN, and then they have to satisfy the FTA requirement. Vietnam's contribution must exceed 40%, so that the product will be regarded as a made in Vietnam product. So this is a very restrictive framework. As a result, what will Vietnam exporters do? 2 things. 1, in order to satisfy this 40% threshold, the value-added threshold, there may be some deceptive behavior. There are parts that are not really manufactured by upstream manufacturers in Vietnam, but they are regarded as so. So this may be illegal. If they really follow all the laws and all the rules of origin, they may have to find a Vietnam supplier which is not that productive, so that the product can enjoy a low tariff privilege in Thailand. So what are the advantages of RCEP? Now we don't care whether the product is made in Vietnam. So as long as the 40% or 50% rule is met, adding up all the components manufactured in the 15 RCEP countries, then that product can enjoy RCEP tariff concession flowing among RCEP countries. So illegal acts can be eliminated. We don't need to spend so much resources to work with the customs. We don't need to involve in creative accounting arrangements. Besides, local suppliers may not need to be commissioned, especially if the local suppliers are low in productivity. If there are other better suppliers with better productivity, then they can be employed. Still, they can enjoy low tariff. So the whole industrial chain will be optimized. Productivity will go up. Trade efficiency will go up. At the same time, within this region, the price of the product will come down because of improved productivity. At the end of the day, the economy and people will benefit. And the remaining 12 chapters are the so-called 21st century part. So they are about service trade, digitalization of economy, data trade, protection of SMEs, and also legal issues, a legal framework to take care of the legal problems. So these 12 chapters, comparing with WTO and other trade agreements, represents an improvement. If you compare with CPTPP, there may be parts about environmental protection and child labor. Those are concepts of the first world in the 21st century. Those are not in RCEP. However, in order to incorporate different economies, economic, political, and cultural backgrounds, we are talking about this all-encompassing cooperation. So let's deal with the economy first. Let's handle trade first. And then after a certain status is reached, then we can turn to the non-economic factors. Well, that will be a future trend. So RCEP is not a fixed FTA. When the member countries evolve and interact, definitely it can be further improved to become a deeper FTA. So I want to focus on the red parts. Intellectual property protection. There is some concrete requirement and there is a suggested framework so that various member countries will respect it. And secondly, some RCEP countries, especially China, have developed e-commerce in a big way onshore, but then there is still room for improvement in cross-border e-commerce. And RCEP provides a lot of legal and technical support, and also some standards for countries to abide by, so that cross-border data trade or e-commerce can be expanded. For SMEs, there are only 3 pages out of 200-odd pages on SMEs, but at least the direction is correct. Usually, in many international agreements, big enterprises can benefit easily from economies of scale, but for small companies, their room for survival will be stifled, and they will face more competition. In the 21st century, we want SMEs to have a better environment to develop and progress. So in this big FTA, we can see some coverage of SMEs. This is encouraging. And then there is dispute settlement. Among different companies, if there are business disputes, there is a litigation guide, and member countries should start to set up some litigation centers. I want to talk about these 4 points because the 21st century part of RCEP is more important to Hong Kong because Hong Kong is a high-end service center in the world. So we should explore more. So how Hong Kong's strengths can be capitalized on. And Hong Kong can also benefit from transformation from these 4 areas. We can realize our soft power more. Okay, I will spend 3 more minutes on this before I turn to Hong Kong. So there will be elimination of trade barriers. And for 92% of traded goods, we will eventually see zero tariff. As Mr. Zhu said, this will not happen overnight. For some products, it may take 10 years to lower the existing tariff to 0%. So why 92% only? Because there are many raw materials and agricultural products, and some governments are still not ready to accept zero tariff for those products. For service sector, there are a lot of trade barriers and restrictions, but at least 65% of service sectors will be fully open in RCEP. There will be almost no trade restrictions. But then, of course, it takes time to reach a zero tariff status. Country of origin. Definitely, this will improve the efficiency and productivity of the supply chain. And for customs procedures, they will be streamlined and simplified so that agricultural products and perishable goods can be released within 6 hours of arrival. I think this is something Hong Kong should explore, and if there are the opportunities, Hong Kong should seize this opportunity because Hong Kong has an international airport with the highest trading volume in the world, and our efficiency and operation is world class. So if customs procedures can be simplified, then I think the air freight industry will see better development than shipping. Finally, apart from trade of goods, there will be more trade of data because e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce will be developed in a big way. So there will be a lot of data flow in this region. Hong Kong can consider to become a data center in the region. Okay, so that part has been covered just now. At this stage, what is the status of RCEP? It commenced on 1st of January this year. At the beginning, there were only 10 countries being RCEP members. South Korea joined in February this month, and then Malaysia will join in March. There are 3 countries that have not ratified yet because of their political system. They are Indonesia, Myanmar, and the Philippines. So they are signing countries among the 15 RCEP countries, but recently, because of some change in the economy due to the pandemic, the government and the Congress have not come to consensus. So there is negative impact because for all the FTAs, well, of course, there will be trade creation as well as trade diversion. From non-member states, trade will flow to those countries with FTAs. Which countries will see the largest benefits under RCEP? Those countries originally with no free trade area agreements will see the largest benefit and the biggest positive impact on GDP, and they are China, Japan, and Korea, South Korea. For the other member countries, they already have different degrees of bilateral trade agreement. For example, between ASEAN and China, they have already got an FTA for a long time. So in terms of trade growth, most would be seen in between China and Japan and Korea. So here you can see the estimated growth in trade. This is a study done by UNCTAD. Let's say in the coming 5 to 10 years, the agreed tariff reduction can be achieved, then there would be a growth of 42 billion USD. 25 billion USD is from trade diversion, so from non-member states to RCEP. 1.7 billion is because of economies of scale and optimization of trade chain, and also reduction of trade barriers and tariff, 1.7 billion. So altogether, 42 billion. So right now, how much is trade in RCEP? The share is 1.8%. Why so small? Because among many member countries, there is zero tariff or low tariff agreement. So mainly among Japan, China, and Korea, 6.7 billion to almost 20 billion of trade growth, especially in Japan. Japan will be the biggest beneficiary. Its growth will be 20 billion. Japan will see a trade growth with other member countries by 5.5%. 5.5% of all RCEP trade. And the three countries at the bottom, well, you can see some negative figures for them. Cambodia, Indonesia, and Vietnam. They have very high trade barriers and high tariff. The timetable for tariff reduction is very long. In other words, many other RCEP countries can reduce tariff to zero within a shorter time, but then for these 3 countries, they still charge low tariff. And as a result, their trade will flow to other lower tariff RCEP countries. For non-RCEP members, what will be the impact on them? They will suffer from negative trade growth. For non-members, their loss will be 25 billion USD in total in trade. EU and US will suffer from 8.3 billion and 5.1 billion respectively. If Hong Kong doesn't join as RCEP member, Hong Kong will lose 3.3 billion USD. But as we all know, Hong Kong government has applied to be RCEP member. So in the coming 1 to 2 years, this trade diversion negative impact will not exist in Hong Kong. At the same time, there will be some non-trade benefits for Hong Kong as an RCEP member. I will spend my last 3 minutes on Hong Kong. Since reunification in 1997, there are 4 pillar industries in Hong Kong, and they are trading and logistics, financial service, professional service, and tourism, and tourism-related industries like catering, F&B, and so on. For these 4 pillar industries, they account for about 60% of Hong Kong's GDP. However, if you look at a breakdown, one industry has been growing dominantly, and that is financial services. Professional services has also grown, but slowly. If you look at trading and logistics and F&B and tourism, there was decline before the pandemic. For logistics and trade, that decline started in 2008. If you look at trade and logistics, how come the share of Hong Kong's GDP and labor force declined in the past 10 years? The first factor is deglobalization. Secondly, Hong Kong faces competition from other ports. In the year 2000, the Kwai Chung container terminal container throughput was number 1 in the world, but then in 2008, it fell to number 7. In 2019, number 8. Shanghai, Singapore, Ningbo, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Busan occupied the front positions. That is about marine cargo. For air cargo, well, Hong Kong last year was number 1. So in terms of logistics and cargo transport, comparing with other Asian cities, Hong Kong lags behind. So if you look at logistics and cargo transport technology, we are not as automated as other cities. And then our physical economy has developed for so many years in China. There is the development of many other ports that can have trade with different countries in the world. Given these circumstances, apart from traditional trade and logistics, what other roles can Hong Kong play? We need to think. So then we have to turn to the 14th Five-Year Plan of China. What role should Hong Kong play? So here you can see the 8 main centers. Our original soft power and competitiveness should be enhanced. We should continue to be international finance, shipping, and trade center. At the same time, we need to become international legal transaction and dispute resolution service center in Asia Pacific, international aviation hub, international creative technology center, cultural arts exchange center between China and the West, and also regional intellectual property trade center. So apart from our original soft power, Hong Kong can also enjoy more stable development under RCEP. Hong Kong government and different stakeholders in Hong Kong should seize RCEP opportunities to develop other roles, other new roles, i.e. the 5 centers that China would like us to develop. Last year, I wrote an article in Hong Kong Economic Journal. And what should Hong Kong do under RCEP? There are 5 main directions based on my analysis. I do believe that with Hong Kong's strengths, the following 5 roles and functions can be played, and we can also develop the 8 main centers. First, the role as super connector. I think this role can be played in a more effective way. 21st century logistics is not about moving a container from one country to another. There are requirements on high-end service sector, including logistics management, insurance, trade credit, lending. A lot of trade credit is now electronic, no longer paper-based. So these are things that Hong Kong should continue to develop as a super connector. This role should be deepened. RCEP allows more cross-border digital economy integration and trade. At the same time, there are a lot of data flowing among different countries. Under RCEP, these data should be stored in different places, and in Hong Kong, we have a lot of good supporting facilities, stable internet and telecommunications facilities. We can consider to serve as RCEP's big data center. In Tseung Kwan O, a big data center has been established. So digital finance and other related industries can be developed. So we enjoy a very good geographic location, so we can consider to serve as big data center for RCEP. Number 3, in Hong Kong and Shenzhen, by means of some policy support of the state, there can be a Hong Kong-Shenzhen Technology Center. In Hong Kong, we have intellectual property protection, which is sound, good legal system, international legal background. We have world-class R&D, especially our healthcare, medical research. In the Greater Bay Area and other mainland cities, they are stronger in development of high-end applied technology and advanced manufacturing. Then we can have a synergy. We can focus on other RCEP member countries, especially the middle-class markets, to come up with a better industrial chain connecting the industry, the academia, and the business. So RMB internationalization will continue. Besides, there will be digitalization of RMB. So with RCEP, many more member countries will be willing to use RMB, and Hong Kong's status in internationalization of RMB can be enhanced. Finally, Dr. Wang also said already that Hong Kong should serve as RCEP Research Center and Policy Research Center. Well, that is an important point. Besides, we should be a legal support hub. We should train more legal talents and help RCEP countries to solve litigation and disputes. Hong Kong can also serve as an RCEP litigation base. Under the 14th Five-Year Plan, Hong Kong should become a legal dispute resolution center. So these are in line with one another. So that's all from me. I hope to have more opportunity for further interaction and exchange, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you, Professor Tang, for the very detailed sharing. So now, let's have all speakers appearing on the screen. So now we are going to have an interaction session. So we will try our best to use Mandarin because this is a webinar for the Greater China region. Just now, many online audiences have already sent me some questions. So Mr. C.Y. Leung of the Hong Kong Coalition made a few points. First of all, regarding Dr. Wang's suggestion on building RCEP think tank, and also in Guangzhou, Nansha, within the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau advisory mechanism in relation to GBA, well, he said that this point should be seriously considered. And just now, I had some interaction with Mr. Leung. He asked a number of questions. So private enterprises in Hong Kong, how can they be better organized? We have Hong Kong TDC and government departments, but apart from the public sector, today we have also got the cooperation of the 6 major chambers of commerce and trade associations. So how can the private sector be better organized so that they have better understanding of RCEP? So this is also one of the questions. So I will ask speakers to make some response. So I am the moderator. Let me raise a point first. Just now, Dr. Wang talked about the Peterson research. So it also talks about Taiwan. When I studied in school, well, at that time there were the 4 little dragons. And then Hong Kong is now applying to join RCEP. Together with other 13 RCEP countries, we already have free trade agreements. But looking into the future 5 to 10 years, because of different reasons, if Taiwan can't join RCEP, then concerning investments in Asia and relationship between the 2 sides of the strait, would there be impacts? Can we ask Dr. Wang to respond first? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wang. I think your question is a good one. And also, thank you, Mr. Leung Chun-ying, for his remarks. Just now, Mr. Leung Chun-ying said that in Hong Kong and Nansha, an RCEP think tank can be created. I think this is really essential. It can also drive the development of GBA. GBA will be in the center of RCEP. It can also serve as super connector, not only between the mainland and Hong Kong and the Greater Bay. Actually, in the whole Asia and RCEP, well, we can revive Hong Kong status in Asia. Hong Kong has very good natural conditions. There are free trade agreements with 13 RCEP countries and also agreement with the mainland. So just now we have heard some good ideas from the other experts. In the future, Hong Kong will serve a lot of functions. So this is really workable. And then about SMEs, I think we should realize Hong Kong's strengths more. So Hong Kong is a financial center, a capital center. Hong Kong also has talent strength. Can Hong Kong be an international talent pool so that RCEP countries would come to Hong Kong to seek talents? As a result, SMEs can also benefit. Mainland enterprises, SMEs can benefit with Hong Kong playing a role in the middle. So mainland GBA enterprises can be brought to RCEP countries. RCEP countries or RCEP companies can also be brought to the mainland. So we should focus more on different countries within RCEP. So how SMEs can benefit, and we should attract more talents to Hong Kong as a talent pool. So RCEP annual conference, RCEP think tank, RCEP research center, all these will be very helpful. You also asked a question about Taiwan. Taiwan has applied to join CPTPP. Of course, they have to meet some requirements. In the past, there were some conventions under WTO and so on. So I think there's the need for the Chinese government to consider everything together. Taiwan has its own consideration, but between Taiwan and mainland China, there are already a lot of trade activities and investments. Taiwan and China has a big trade surplus. So I believe if the whole region can grow, then Taiwan can also benefit. And it will also benefit from RCEP. If Hong Kong can join first, well, the conditions, the opportunity and the strengths will be stronger than those of Taiwan. So I think the opportunities are in Hong Kong, and the opportunities can also drive the development in Taiwan as well as the whole region. Well, thank you, Dr. Wang. Dr. Zhu, can you also respond? Yes. I do agree with what Dr. Wang said. Comparing Hong Kong and Taiwan, no matter whether you talk about RCEP or CPTPP, well, Taiwan will see a lot of obstacles. Right now, if Taiwan is excluded from RCEP and CPTPP, then, well, I think Taiwan will lose out. So that's why in the Peterson research, the impact of RCEP on Taiwan is negative. In recent years, in terms of industrial upgrading, especially in the core area like chips, well, they have erected high barriers, and their competitiveness and their market share will not be greatly affected because they can't join RCEP. I think the more impact will be in other areas, for example, in the change of supply chain and in areas where barriers are lower. I think in those areas, Taiwan will be worse off. And then for areas related to high technology, I think Taiwan has its advantages. Then if you look at RCEP integration, there is one point I would like to supplement. To China, RCEP is something good because RCEP happened with the background of a big change in U.S.-China trade relations. After 2018, since the trade war, now I think they focused more on technology and other core areas in terms of their competition. And then if you talk about the strategic competition between U.S. and China, I think it is going to be a medium to long-term thing. There is competition, there are conflicts in different areas, but overall speaking, in the past 5 years, the worry about U.S.-China relations has risen. And then when you consider RCEP and other RCEP countries, I think ASEAN, it is quite clear that ASEAN and RCEP doesn't want to have too much to do with the U.S.-China relationship. It is more focused on economy. This is beneficial to China. As such as now, China's hub role in global economy is rising, and this is beneficial to China. So political problems or issues will not be mixed with economic issues. So I think more economic integration under RCEP will be a better choice for China as well as for Asia. Thank you. Patrick, thank you very much for staying online. Just now, Mr. Leung Chun-ying talked about SMEs in Hong Kong and also the trade sector. So apart from relying on Hong Kong TDC, how can they be better organized? What kind of platforms does Hong Kong need in order to help the SMEs to develop the RCEP market Right, thank you. Thank you, Kennedy. Thank you, Mr. Leung, for the question. It is true that for SMEs, the most important thing is that RCEP is an important reminder so that they all pay attention once again to the overall market potential. Because in Hong Kong, there are many SMEs. And in the second and third generation of the businesses, they are more concerned about the Asian markets or ASEAN markets instead of US and European markets. So I think the prospect in ASEAN will enable SMEs to pay more attention, to set their goals, to do more with that market. Besides, Mr. Leung's question is very valid. Apart from SMEs in Hong Kong, the overall capability is very strong. How can we contribute to RCEP? Even without RCEP, the Hong Kong service sector and different professional sectors are already servicing many big projects within the region after the pandemic. Especially if you look at ASEAN countries, they are seriously affected during the pandemic. And now it is more urgent that they need investment. They want other people, other countries to participate in their local projects. And Hong Kong has enough experts to take part and to facilitate, because in Hong Kong, as I said just now, there was the relocation of Indonesian capital project. They need to build a new capital, and this can capitalize on Hong Kong as being a metropolitan city to build a new capital. So the regional platform is built, and we have a super strong subway system, public transport system, and then we have the airport and our highway system, the smart city plan and design. So we have experts in all these areas. We can pull together all these experts and services. We can give our advice and we can contribute our creativity to the Indonesian government. So we can actually achieve some collaboration. If we are able to facilitate this deal, well, we don't need to contribute money. We can contribute our ideas and our services and our partnership idea. And then the funding party can be from mainland enterprises or Japan, Korea, or New Zealand, Australia. We can connect them all. Then in this way, this is one direction that we can serve RCEP. So enterprises and experts can get together and we can go out together and pitch to the RCEP member countries. We can understand their needs, and then after the pandemic, usually Hong Kong TDC will organize some delegations and visit local countries. We can meet with local officials and business partners, and then we can facilitate all these projects. So I think in this way we can capitalize on our strengths, and after that RCEP member countries can see Hong Kong's value, then we can join RCEP. Okay, thank you, Patrick. Mr. Leung just sent me a message. He said that he agrees. The relocation of Indonesian capital is such that Hong Kong's professional services can join hands with construction companies of mainland China. We can work together and strive for some parts of the project. This will be win-win-win situation. Thank you. Okay, now, Professor Tang, in the past years, I often came across SMEs. They have heard about the Belt and Road and the 14th Five-Year Plan and the GBA development. And now there is an even bigger RCEP scheme. So for the SMEs, they have limited manpower. But just now in your speech, you talk about e-commerce. And right now in Hong Kong, the e-commerce platform is not really connected to the mainland yet. And then regarding the 10 ASEAN countries, I know that the platform is still being underway. So we are talking about a huge geography and many jurisdictions. How can Hong Kong SMEs seize the RCEP opportunity in the area of building of e-commerce platform? What do you think? Thank you, Mr. Wong, for your question. I believe that RCEP is, as you said just now, attaches much importance to the protection and support for SMEs. At the same time, they also want to build a platform for cross-border digital trade. So when looking at mainland experience, there are many online platforms, and SMEs perform quite well on them. So comparing with traditional trade, I think when it comes to e-commerce and digital online commerce, it is a good opportunity for SMEs. Besides, you just mentioned that there are dual circulation policies in China. And Hong Kong SMEs, what kind of role can they play? I think regarding internal circulation, Hong Kong can do a better job by bringing in talents and bringing in technology. Hong Kong can do a better job in terms of external circulation. What can we do better? I think we all know that Hong Kong is the most internationalized city in China. I have many friends who are bosses of SMEs. Some are entrepreneurs. They often say to me that in Shenzhen, Shanghai, they have their own branch companies. And the Chinese market to them is much, much bigger than Hong Kong. If they still maintain headquarters in Hong Kong, the reason is that they are waiting for ASEAN and Southeast Asian countries and the less developed countries and middle-income countries to develop faster in the coming 10 to 15 years. They are of the view that this is the advantage of Hong Kong, so that's why they have not moved their headquarters to Shanghai and Beijing. They maintain it in a more internationalized place. Hong Kong enjoys national support. At the same time, we have China at the back, and we also have soft power here in Hong Kong. We can bring in international talents in a more international background. We can hire international or overseas experts and connectors. In this way, we can benefit more from continuous development in Southeast Asia. So under RCEP, I think Hong Kong sees good opportunity for SMEs to continue to make money and develop their business. At the same time, we are more internationalized all along. So we can bring in talents from international world as well as from mainland. In this way, we can play a better role as super connector. Thank you, Professor Tang. Now we only have 5 minutes left. So I would now like to invite the 4 speakers to help our audiences to have a better understanding. Now, Hong Kong has not joined RCEP yet. There may be still 20 odd months to wait. So in this period, what more can Hong Kong do to develop and reinforce our status so that we will not become backward? We cannot lag behind during this interim period. Of course, we know that we have FTA with 13 RCEP members, but then in the coming 10 odd years, what more can Hong Kong do? What more can the Hong Kong government, the private sector do? So can each of you spend 1 minute to share some insights? Who would like to go first? Patrick? Yes. Mr. Lau, please. Thank you, Kennedy. I believe we should focus on SMEs in considering RCEP. So I think there should be deepening transformation as the answer, because this is the first year of the 5-year plan, and we should take this opportunity so that enterprises can look closely at the RCEP opportunities and also developments among RCEP members. Dr. Wang talked about the integration of the region, and now the center is in Asia. So I think SMEs should consider whether they have the capability of this kind of development. They should set their goal about upgrading and transformation. If Hong Kong TDC can help, please feel free to contact us. Thank you, Patrick. So upgrading and transformation. Right. I can supplement. First of all, Kennedy, thank you for moderating this webinar. Now we are in the post-pandemic era. In the future, in the past 2-3 years, the pandemic had stopped people flow in the world. There is even decline. We saw that in mainland China. In Shanghai, we had 200,000 expatriates in the past. Now, 160,000 only. In Beijing, there used to be 100,000, now only 60,000. So a big decline. But then, of course, it is important to attract international talents. You can see that in the Winter Olympics in Beijing. We need to attract the expatriates to come back because they can make contribution to us. Now, in Hong Kong, before we can officially join RCEP, we should develop Hong Kong as a talent pool for Greater Bay Area and RCEP. I think Hong Kong has all the advantages. For example, the language advantage, legal system, lifestyle, degree of internationalization, all these are strengths of Hong Kong. And GBA, the Belt and Road, all need talents. So Hong Kong can become a talent pool. Let's seize the opportunities in the post-pandemic era. There will be international flow of talents, and we should seize the opportunity to beef up our talent pool. We should enhance the ratio of international talents. So Hong Kong being at the center of RCEP can benefit. I mentioned 8 or 10 areas of possibilities. So everything has to do with talents. Hong Kong is in a good position to attract international talents. Thank you, Dr. Wang. Your points are clear. Next, Mr. Zhu, Dr. Zhu, thank you. Yes, I also want to echo what Dr. Wang said. Talent is the key. In Hong Kong, in the coming 1 to 2 years, I think Hong Kong may see a loss of talents, which is a big problem. In the past 2 years, the world suffered from the pandemic. Now we see a new wave of the pandemic. Of course, we are moving into the post-pandemic era, but then the impact on flow of talents will continue for some time. If we cannot leave this problem, then there will be further loss and segmentation of talents flow. Based on my personal observation, I am quite worried because recently there was outflow of talents. So mainlanders began to return to the mainland. And for American and European companies, many of the senior executives wanted to go back to their home countries for family reunion. So, of course, this is something that we need to consider also while we are fighting the pandemic. And in the future, in the post-pandemic economic recovery, how can we do more about green development, upgrading of the manufacturing industry? I think more opportunities can arise. In the short run, I think we should focus on retaining talents so that we can maintain our status as a number of different centers. Right, thank you, Dr. Zhu. Finally, Professor Tang. Yes, Mr. Wong. I am the last one. I don't have much to add. I agree with all three speakers, especially about bringing in talents and retaining talents. We hope the pandemic can be controlled as soon as possible to avoid loss of talents. Just now, I talked about the 20th century and the 21st century international trade being different. So we don't need to miss the traditional form of trade too much. So a cargo went from one country to Hong Kong to another destination. We should focus more on our soft power. Green environmental protection, green finance, digital finance, fintech, and so on. These are also closely related to international trade. So we should attract more talents who can manage the internet and international trade. Secondly, through green policies, together with digital transformation, then within the bigger RCEP environment and platform, Hong Kong can transform to become a deeper, more efficient, more influential super connector and super intermediary. Thank you. 4 speakers. Thank you. Mr. Brian Low from the Trade and Industry Department, the 6 General Chambers of Commerce and China Daily. Now I would like to declare the adjournment of this webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you.